everyone, it's Mostly Casual Commander. I'm BK, and today's game features 4 commanders from Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate. Tasha the Witch Queen wants to exile opponents' cards and cast them herself. Miirym aims at copying as many dragon spells as possible. Elminster hopes to have a ton of fairy dragon tokens in the air, and Raggadragga looks to make use of all the mana dorks out there. So let's get right into the game. I have a pre-game action. With Leyline of Abundance in my opening hand, I get to cast it for free, making any future mana dorks I play tap for more mana. Then J-Man starts us off proper. He'll play Prismatic Vista as a land for turn. He'll sacrifice it, taking 1 point of life, and he'll put a swamp onto the battlefield. He'll then use that swamp to cast a Soul Ring. Then he passes the turn over to Kyle, who plays a forest as his land for turn, followed up with a Soul Ring himself, and he'll use that to cast a Talisman of Creativity. This is going really well. Kyle then passes the turn over to Busterkins, who plays a Prairie Stream, which will enter the battlefield tapped. So he passes to me. I drop a forest, and then I have to pass the turn to J-Man. He plays a Reflecting Pool, which can currently only tap for black mana. He passes the turn to Kyle, who plays Arid Mesa as his land. He will sacrifice it, pay 1 life, and with that he'll go fetch up Steam Vents, having that enter the battlefield untapped, taking 2 more points of life. With that, he'll cast Jeska's Will, targeting me, where I have 6 cards in my hand, so he will gain 6 red floating mana, and use that immediately to cast an Ancient Copper Dragon. On turn 2. Thanks, Kyle. And to make things better, he casts Sylvan Library, ensuring that he could draw some additional cards each turn. He passes over to Busterkins, who plays a Plains, and with that, he'll cast an Azorius Signet, giving him some additional mana ramp, and he passes the turn over to me. I drop a mountain as my land, and cast Ornithopter of Paradise, a flying mana dork that, with Leyline out, can tap for 2. On my end step, J-Man casts Vampiric Tutor, so he will go and fetch up a card, put it on the top of his library, and lose 2 life. And then he'll go to his turn, dropping a Bajuka Bog as his land, exiling Kyle's graveyard. On to Kyle's turn, Sylvan Library will replace his draw step, so he'll get 3 cards, and he decides to keep both the additional cards by taking 8 life. Then right into combat. He swings at J-Man, but before damage, J-Man casts Baleful Mastery for full rip, exiling the Ancient Copper Dragon, and putting Kyle's Sadness on the stack. Kyle then plays a forest as his land. He then taps out to cast his commander, Miirym, Sentinel Worm. Miirym will enable copying of dragons whenever they ETB. Over to Busterkins, he plays Oath of Jace, allowing him to draw 3 cards, discarding 2, and hopeful to have some future scry action on his upkeep. So he will discard his 2 cards and then play Sea of Clouds, which will enter the battlefield untapped. He passes the turn to me. I play Forest as my land, and cast Fires of Yavimaya, setting it up so that my creatures have haste on future turns. Over to J-Man, he draws and plays a Cabal Coffers. I think J-Man's really searching for that island, but is not finding it yet. Onto Kyle's turn, he will draw with Sylvan Library and put the 2 of them back, not taking any life. He then plays a mountain, and then he casts Atsushi, the Blazing Sky. When it ETBs, Miirym will trigger, getting a copy of Atsushi that's not legendary. He then follows that up by playing Fauna Shaman, hoping to be able to tutor up some creature cards in the future. Then into combat, he swings his commander at me, and I take 6 points of commander damage from Miirym. On his end step, Busterkins casts Brainstorm, drawing 3 cards, putting 2 cards from his hand back on top in any order. Onto his turn, he'll draw and play an island. After that, he'll cast his commander, Elminster. Elminster can potentially reduce the cost of some of his instants and sorceries. It could draw him cards and scry, or he can make fairy dragons equal to the mana value of a card he exiles off the top of his library. But before we show you that, here's Meatball. So anyway, it was a treasure cruise. So Busterkins gets 8 1/1 flying fairy dragon creature tokens because of Elminster, and then he passes. I play a mountain as my land, and then I cast my commander, Raggadragga Gore-Guts Boss. He grants +2/+2 to my mana dorks, allows them to untap if I attack with them, as well as rewards me for casting really big spells. So I swing at J-Man with my Ornithopter and hasty Raggadragga, and then pass the turn. J-Man plays his own Ornithopter of Paradise, which allows him to have access to blue, which he desperately needs. Over to Kyle, on his upkeep, he activates his Fauna Shaman, discarding Niv Mizzet, and getting Terror of the Peaks from his library to his hand. Then onto his turn proper, he'll draw 3 with Sylvan Library, putting 2 of them back on top. He then casts Terror of the Peaks, and when it ETBs, Miirym triggers, getting him a copy. So these copies will see one another, so he gets to sling some damage and kills Elminster. Then he moves to combat with Miirym and his Atsushis, smacking Busterkins and myself in the face with dragons. Over to Busterkin's turn, he plays an island and has to say go. On my turn, I cast a Viridian Joiner, which at this time can tap for a total of 4 mana, which I use to cast Toski, Bearer of Secrets. And then, completely forgetting that Toski has haste, I swing at J-Man again, the only real target that I have right now, and this does allow me to untap my Ornithopter as well as draw 2 cards off of Toski. Over to J-Man's turn, he looks at his mana base with disappointment, but nevertheless casts Reanimate, targeting Niv Mizzet in Kyle's graveyard. So he gets a Niv Mizzet, he takes 6 points of life due to Reanimate, but now he has a big scary thing that can hopefully draw him some cards. On Kyle's upkeep, he activates Fauna Shaman again, discarding a creature and tutoring up Old Gnawbone into his hand. Then he'll draw for turn with Sylvan Library, again replacing his draw step. He will put 1 card back, taking 4 points of life, dropping Hinterland Harbor as his land for turn, and then he casts Old Gnawbone. But in response, Busterkins says Arcane Denial, which will trigger Niv Mizzet Perun on J-Man's board, drawing J-Man a card, as well as pinging me 1 life. Then Arcane Denial will resolve and counters Old Gnawbone. On to combat, Kyle swings at Busterkins and myself. Busterkins tries to preserve some of his life by throwing a Fairy Dragon in front of one of the attackers. I declare no blocks, sitting at 18 commander damage from Miirym. I'm not afraid though. And then over to Busterkin's turn, Kyle and Busterkins both draw off of Arcane Denial's triggered ability. Busterkins plays an island and then recasts his commander, Elminster, again allowing him to hopefully draw some cards and make some dragons. In this case, he activates his +2, he gets to draw a card and scry 2, which he puts to the bottom. On my turn, I play a mountain, then I cast Elemental Bond, hoping to draw some cards to find an answer to Kyle. Then I cast Rada, Heir to Keld, who is a 4/4 thanks to Raggadragga, so this draws me a card off of Elemental Bond, and then I cast Turn Timber Symbiosis, in hopes of finding some sort of giant creature that can answer Kyle, because Kyle needs to die, like right now. So this triggered Niv Mizzet, drawing J-Man a card and pinging me 1 life, and then J-Man says Swan Song to the Turn Timber Symbiosis. This will again trigger Niv Mizzet, drawing him a card. I get a 2/2 though. So of note, I did miss a trigger here from Raggadragga. When I cast Turn Timber Symbiosis, one of my creatures would have untapped and gotten +7/+7. However, it did not impact the game. So I attack Kyle, draw cards off Toski, then pass the turn. J-Man plays a reskinned command tower as Summoner's Rift. Then he casts Mind Flayer the Shadow from the Stranger Things Secret Lair drop. He moves to end step, and Mind Flayer says, give me the bottom card of each opponent's library, and then he could cast it later on. On Kyle's upkeep, he activates again Fauna Shaman. He finds Atarka, World Render. He puts that to his hand, and then he draws 3 cards. He decides to put 2 of them back. He drops Otawara, Soaring City, as his land for turn, and then he casts Atarka, World Render. And then terrible things happen. First, his Terror of the Peaks will trigger, dealing enough damage to kill Niv Mizzet, as well as ping Busterkins some life. Then the copy of Atarka will enter the battlefield, triggering the Terrors of the Peak, dealing Busterkins 12 more points of damage. And with that, Kyle swings out at all of his opponents with double striky, horrible flying Dragons of Death, and he wins the game. Congratulations, Kyle. So Kyle had quite the explosive first couple of turns of the game. What did you guys think of that? Miirym certainly is a powerful commander with a really cool ability. Let us know what you think in the comments. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, thank you for watching.